Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Paul Creer, 257 Stormy Road. I am here tonight because my last appearance before this council, after my last appearance before this council, I became aware that in September of 2017, this mayor and council saw fit to enter into an employment agreement with Administrator Moran. I read the latest agreement and was astonished at its terms. In comparing the most recent agreement with the previous agreement, I saw several changes that concern me. In the new agreement, there are the following new items. The administrator is entitled to 1 year leave of absence at his own discretion. This is twice the leave permitted under the previous agreement. The administrator is now given 2 longevity raises, one in 2017 of 5% and one in 2020 of 7%. This is particularly offensive because longevity was specifically removed from the administrator's previous agreement. I should also note that in a recent news article, Administrator Jim Moran himself stated that we, quote, have eliminated longevity from all our contract negotiations. Now, in each of the 4 years covered under this newest agreement, the administrator receives a 2% salary increase in each year. In this new agreement, the administrator now receives 30 vacation days. This is 4 more over the last agreement and is excessive in my opinion. Another new item included in this latest employment agreement is a $3,000 educational incentive payment. This is ridiculous, since a certain level of education has already been factored into the job description. In another recent news article, Administrator Jim Moran stated that Stafford negotiates contracts that are below the state's 2% cap. Moran's agreement includes 20% of increases in 4 years. Before the end of this agreement, Administrator Moran will be receiving over $250,000 a year in salary, compensation, and benefits.
That's not accurate, Mr. Greer. It's not accurate. But go ahead.
If you added the value of all of the raises and the cost of the benefits, and the cost of the compensation.
With benefits, okay.
Yes.
With benefits.
In my opinion, Administrator Moran never should have been hired to work for Stafford Township. Administrator Moran should not have been given this gold-plated agreement, and he should be terminated. I have no idea why the mayor and council would give the administrator this agreement. It is certainly not in the best interest of Stafford Township. Maybe it has more to do with the fact that Administrator Moran is a political supporter of the mayor who has contributed to the mayor's campaign in the past. Thank you.
Well, if you could contribute to my...
I don't think I did, but go ahead.
No. Well, let me just explain a couple of things because there's some misleading information here. Longevity, stay down. You had your time.
No, you're addressing me.
Well, I let you speak. I let you speak. I didn't interrupt.
I'm not going to interrupt. Go ahead, Mayor.
Longevity is grandfathered in for the people that were here before we stopped doing longevity. Mr. Moran was here prior to us making that change. That change was for new employees. Yes, it was. You were here when we did that.
It wasn't in his last agreement.
Please, I did not interrupt you. Last meeting, you kept interrupting me. Okay, the educational stipend's the same thing. That was approved for the employees that were in here at that time. They're grandfathered in. Same with the police department. All employees in the township, they're all grandfathered in with those stipends that they were entitled to. So the new employees that are being hired are not getting longevity, and they're not getting these stipends.
Well, actually, Mr. Mayor, can I just correct for 1 second? They're not getting longevity, new employees are not. But every employee in this town, except for me, received that $3,000 if they had a master's degree. Every single employee, and you voted on those contracts multiple times, approving that $3,000 for every single employee except me in the time you were on the council and every council since I came here. So that's a misnomer to state that. The longevity is, in fact, the 5%. That's accurate. And in 2021, I believe it goes to 7%. It's not cumulative, it goes to 7%. So, Mr. Mayor, if you want to continue.
Yes, I would like to continue. There's reasons why Mr. Moran's getting the salary he is, and I'd like to explain this as simple as possible. We try to run this township like we do a business. Over the years, since I've been mayor, one of our objectives have been to cut down the cost of operating the township. In that effect, and you should know this, Paul, we have reduced the number of employees by over 30 through attrition. So we have over 30 less employees than we had when I took over as mayor. Each one of those employees represents about $100,000 in burden cost to the township. So that's over $3 million saved every single year in just reducing that. Now, how do we do that? We do that by consolidating positions. And when you look at this and I say, okay, the water sewer administrator, if we had one, in other towns would typically get in a burden cost about $150,000 a year. And Mr. Moran has taken on that job. The affordable housing floodplain management, that previously cost us about $130,000 a year. We took that job when Bonnie retired. We gave Bob Castell $13,000 in additional stipends to manage the downstairs. We paid a licensed engineer to take care of the engineering work that required special licenses, and he gets about $25,000 a year. And we paid Mr. Moran an extra $15,000 a year to take over the balance of all that work. The other thing I want to mention is that most of the towns our size have deputy administrators. We don't. Mr. Moran takes all of this on his own. We don't have a second administrator. That's another savings of at least another $120,000 a year. Now, what's important to note here is that Mr. Moran does all this extra work, does not get any overtime, does not get any comp time, does not get any special treatment for all the extra hours he puts in to do these other jobs. The bottom line here is when you do a cost estimate on this, the annual savings to our taxpayers is about $347,000 a year by Mr. Moran taking on that extra work. Now, if I'm paying Mr. Moran a little bit higher than somebody else, it's for a good reason. This council looks at all of these things, and when we take on these consolidations of positions, and we've done this throughout the entire township, as you know, we've consolidated water, sewer, and public work all through the town, animal control, everything. Consolidated things down to keep the cost of operations way down. And we've been very successful. Since I've been mayor, the tax rate increase has only changed by 1.4 cents. That's pretty impressive. We've reduced the bonding debt by $45.5 million by doing these things.
Since you've been mayor, the general
You're interrupting me,
appropriations
Mr.
have
Creer.
gone up $10
Mr. Creer.
million,
Mr.
sir.
Creer, you know, last meeting you kept
You
interrupting.
don't get to make representations without, being questioned.
You can question me when I'm done.
Fair enough.
You know, I don't like being treated with the rudeness that you have. The bottom line here is, when we make business decisions for this town, we look at all of these things and say, if I have to lose this position, and I can replace that position for a small fraction of the cost, is that the right thing for the taxpayers if we can get the same work done just as well? And it is the right decision. So if I can pay Mr. Moran an extra $20,000 or $30,000 a year to take on these extra jobs, and more relative to another administrator of an equal sized town, and I save $347,000 a year, that's a good business decision. Now, you may speak.
I may, thank you.
You may.
You have, working for this town right now, very competent department heads, very competent township employees
Totally agree.
who are fairly compensated, okay, and do an excellent job. To suggest that you're giving Mr. Moran $25,000 or $30,000 extra is ludicrous. This is $250,000 in compensation by the end of this four-year contract.
Mr. Creer,
Thank you.
Mr. Creer, if I could ask you one question, please?
Shoot.
Mr. Gannon, would you say that Mr. Gannon is an excellent department head?
Yes,
Would you say he does a fine job?
yes.
Would you say he's worth his salary?
I don't recall what his salary
Do
is.
you, would you think he's worth his salary? Regardless of what the number is?
I don't, well, no, it's.
Because his
It's
compensation
not
is
a question,
identical.
it's not a question of regardless of what
Okay,
the
his
number.
compensation is identical
What I'm
to
saying to
mine.
you is that the number is not infinite. There
No,
is
it's
a
not.
finite value.
The number
I don't-
is equal. The CFO, who is,
We're discussing you, sir.
I understand it. The
Not the
CFO is subordinate to me. His salary is the same as mine. The police chief, who is subordinate to me, makes significantly more than I do. The captain of the police department also makes more than I do, and the lieutenants make almost as much as I do.
The terms of their compensation are much different than yours, sir.
No, they're not.
They certainly
No, they're
are.
not.
Hey, Paul,
They're significantly greater.
let me just jump in here for 1 second. I've worked for private companies my whole life, never worked in government. I know you do.
Sure.
You know, I know that
Sure.
you probably get the same things, longevity, personal days, sick days.
I do not get longevity, sir.
You don't get, okay.
No, longevity is a dinosaur. It's an
Okay,
antique.
all right. Well, you have a state vehicle, right? You drive
No, I
around-
do not unless I'm on call, sir.
Oh, okay. Well, I see in the parking lot.
Well, I'm on call.
Oh, okay. Bottom line is this,
Don't-
is
going
that
in-
with,
going to
with,
attack
with
me,
all,
sir, let's
with
make
all
sure
the
that you
different, with
understand
all
what
the
the facts
different,
are.
with all the different jobs that I've handled, for example, at my company, I have guys that are overseeing $10 to $15 million.
Okay?
They may have 15 employees, 18 employees. Throughout the entire state, I got guys that are making anywhere from $125,000 to almost $200,000 because of what they do, and they make money for the company. If they didn't make money for the company, they would be gone. That's the way private companies work.
I'm not suggesting that
Okay, well,
Mr. Moran
okay,
not
Mr. Moran,
be paid.
Mr. Moran so happens has more than 200 employees that he oversees. He also is doing 2 jobs because he took over the water department, which when Paul Shabs was here, we were paying him $60,000 or $70,000. So he's doing 2 jobs. So I'm trying to make
How
an
much was
analysis,
Mr.
I'm trying
Shives
to make an
making when he was
analysis
here,
for you
sir?
that a guy that's overseeing $46 million and then about another $15 to $20 million
Mm-hmm.
in water and sewer, he has a very big job, very big job. And you may not think it's worth it, but when I look at that and I say, okay, well, I have guys working for me, they have 15 employees and they're doing 12, and they're
Are
doing
they
10.
making $250,000?
Not a
sir?
quarter, but they're making 150, 160, 180, and they wouldn't be there if they weren't making the company money, Paul. This gentleman, listen, I've had my differences with Mr. Moran, and you should know that more than anybody, because there's a lot of times we bang heads on a lot of different issues. But my bottom line is the man has done a great job. I get in back room with him, we have screaming matches, but he has saved this town millions and millions and millions of dollars. If I was his CEO, and I was the guy who was passing out the money, I would have no problem paying a man that makes this town money. And Jim has proven that over and over again. And you should know that, Paul, because you sat here. When those grant monies came in, he was the one that did the legwork and found that money that brought in millions of dollars. He came up with the ideas of the trash truck, the leaf truck that actually picks up and has saved the town and its people.
Well, I'm not here
Little-
to debate the leaf
Okay,
truck.
well, but my point is that he's overseeing a tremendous job.
I'm simply saying that he's not
Okay,
worth the
and-
amount of
okay,
money
and that's
you've
your
decided
feeling,
to
and
pay
that's
him.
okay.
I'm also saying that you've now restored benefits that previously had been removed from his contract and were in point of fact, that Stafford Township had been making an effort to remove from all employment contracts.
If I may correct, you,
Nothing's
they were
ever
never
been removed
removed.
from my
They were
contract.
never removed.
Nothing has ever been
Sir,
removed.
I've got your earlier
You-
agreement,
you-
and it specifically says that longevity is removed.
Longevity's not there, period. It was never given to me.
It specifically
was
says
never given
there
to
is
me.
no longevity.
No longevity, you're right. It was
Correct.
subsequently given to me. Nobody gets longevity on day one. No one. I've been here 10 years before I got longevity. That was not uncommon for people hired at
So
the time I was hired.
you're suggesting that 20% in increases over 4 years is a reasonable target. Is that what you're saying?
Mr. Greer,
How do the rest of the township
Mr.
employees
Greer.
feel that you're being so profligate with our money?
Mr. Creer, you either agree or disagree
Fair enough.
with what Steve said.
Oh,
mean,
I disagree.
Okay.
Yes.
Fine, then you're finished. What is
Oh,
there, what
I
else
didn't
is there
suggest-
to argue
Well, I don't know.
that you
You guys
haven't
were talking to
already
me.
said?
All
What-
right. I think we'll call it. Thank you.
I just have to say that if we had to remove Mr. Moran and hire the people to do these other jobs, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's floodplain management, whether it's water, water and sewer administrator, the cost would be so much greater. And that's the reason we made the decisions we did. It's to save taxpayers' money, and I'm going to leave it at that.
And
Mr. Sorensen.
can I, Mr. Mayor, can I answer one question?
Sure.
Mr. Greer asked, what was Mr. Shives' compensation? $275,000 10 years ago when he left. That was his compensation, and you fully supported it at the time, Mr. Greer. So that's what he made when he left, with full 12% longevity.
I wasn't on council.
Well, you weren't on council, but you were supportive of it.
I like Paul a lot. He's a good guy.
So clearly it's personality, not competency.
Okay.
Oh,
Mr.
my
Sorensen,
God.
Mr. Sorensen,